You're listening to the Oncology Nursing Podcast, where ONS Voices Talk Cancer, a resource from the Oncology Nursing Society. Through conversations with subject matter experts, we examine the important issues in oncology nursing, from new treatments to patient-centered research to advancements in clinical practice. Join us as we hear from nurses in all facets of oncology care, from benchside to bedside and everywhere in between. Welcome to the Oncology Nursing Podcast.
Welcome to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Houlihan, ONS President. And today we are joined by Dr. Betty Ferrell, long-term ONS member and member of the Greater Los Angeles ONS Chapter. Dr. Ferrell is a world-renowned researcher and clinician in the field of palliative care. She is director of the Division of Nursing Research and Education at City of Hope National Medical Center in Duarte, California, and is the principal investigator of the End-of-Life Nursing Education Consortium project, well known as ELNEC. ELNEC is celebrating an incredible milestone, and Dr. Ferrell is here to share the story of ELNEC. Towards the end of our discussion, keep listening to hear from ONS members about how ELNEC education has influenced their ability to provide patients with the best possible palliative and end-of-life care. As of November 2020, more than 1 million nurses and other professionals have been trained using the ELNEC curriculum. Dr. Ferrell, thank you for joining us today, and congratulations on this huge milestone.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, and it is an exciting time for all of us.
ELNEC was established in 2000. Can you walk us through the project's history?
Yes, it's a really interesting history. As we look back to 20 years ago, the project began with my one colleague at City of Hope, Rose Varani, and Rose is actually celebrating her 45th year as an oncology nurse this year. So we've both been around a long time. And it was really the late 1990s that we began to see around the country the interest in palliative care. And we also saw the development of several projects, for example, focused on physician education in palliative care. And yet, as oncology nurses, we believe very strongly that there was a need to also educate nurses in these same ideas of palliative care, improving pain and symptoms, psychosocial support, grief and bereavement, all the aspects of palliative care. And so Rose and I began to look for support to start a similar initiative for nursing education. And a really interesting thing happened, which was no one wanted to provide support. We consistently had doors closed. We were told either, oh, surely nursing already knows all of this, or no, nursing doesn't really need this. It's about medicine, or all of the excuses. And so it actually took us almost, most of the time from 1995 to 2000 to get any support at all. Finally, we received one small grant, a needs assessment grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which in some ways was sort of a dare. They were confident that there was not a need, and we were confident that we could demonstrate a need. So we conducted this needs assessment in which we talked to practicing nurses, faculty. We reviewed textbooks in nursing. We looked at nursing school curriculum, and every place we looked, the same conclusion was true. Nurses needed support in order to provide good palliative care for all patients and families who were facing serious illness. And so finally, I think we just wore everyone down, because in January of 2000, we were funded to begin the ELNEC project. And the ELNEC project, the first grant we received was for 3 years. And what we were supposed to do is develop one curriculum and carry out 5 national conferences for nurses. And that was supposed to be the end. And so, of course, here we are 20 years later, over 240 national courses that we've personally held, 100 countries, 12 languages. Obviously, the story has been a very different story than we first imagined. So we're really excited about all the opportunities that we've had to do this work.
Well, thank you for your persistence. So with that success and having trainers in all 50 states, plus the 100 countries you just mentioned, what was the key to becoming this worldwide palliative care entity in just such a short period of time?
I think the real key was to listen close to what nurses were telling us that they really needed. And everywhere we looked, whether it was a new graduate, a very experienced oncology nurse, an administrator, a hospice provider, everywhere we looked, people said, we need a standard curriculum. We need to raise the bar so that nurses can be prepared to provide this kind of care. And the truth was, so many of us were trained at a time where the goal of nursing care, to be a good nurse, meant your job was to get people better, get them up and moving, get them to drink more and eat more and improve their function. And all of our focus was on really kind of a rehabilitative approach. And yet for oncology nurses, we knew that for so many patients, they would not survive their cancer, that end-of-life care was important. But for all patients, even those who would become long-term cancer survivors, even for those who would perhaps live several years and then experience a recurrence or die from their disease, that palliative care was important. And so we just persisted with the message that nurses are the primary providers of care, that all patients facing a serious illness need good palliative care, and that patients will not get that care unless nurses are prepared to deliver it.
In a few minutes, we're going to talk about some of the strategies you use to educate. And I think that probably also was one of your keys. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you is that over the last 2 decades, there has been changes in our thinking about palliative care. How has palliative care shifted since you first started with ELNEC?
There has been remarkable progress. I think, again, if you look back historically, we know that this entire field began because of hospice. Hospice care started in the UK at St. Christopher's. Florence Wald, a nurse and dean at the School of Nursing at Yale, was listening and learning about this place called St. Christopher's. She traveled to St. Christopher's and then came back to the United States. And as a nurse, she said, we have to do this. We need this in America. And it was really Florence Wald who started the first hospice in America. So the great news is that we do have this model of care, hospice. And there's so much that we should all be grateful for the hospice community that has taught all of us in every field, oncology, critical care, cardiology, everywhere. We've learned from hospice. Probably the biggest challenge, though, is that because our beginnings were with hospice, that has meant that there's this very close association between this word palliative care and hospice, meaning people immediately equate it as end-of-life care. And so in oncology, we see this every day, even continuing into 2020, that when we approach a patient to say, gee, we think you could really benefit from a palliative care consult, or we'd like to ask the palliative care team to stop by. Or when we approach a medical oncologist or even one of our colleague advanced practice nurses to say, I really think this patient would benefit from palliative care. It's still a common response from patients, families, and even providers to say, not yet. Oh, no, this patient's just starting another round of chemo, or, oh, no, this patient's a transplant candidate, or we're, starting a new immunotherapy for this patient. And so our association of palliative care with hospice and end-of-life care still is the biggest barrier we face, because it means that patients are not getting referred to palliative care until very late in the course of disease. And that really is shortchanging patients and families.
Can you describe the types of courses that ELNEC offers and how those courses can really aid oncology nurses?
When we started, again, we were just so thrilled to be able to start ELNEC at all. And so we started with this idea of one curriculum, the core curriculum. And we tried very hard to make sure that, for example, pediatrics was represented within the core curriculum. We had pediatric content, pediatric examples. But it didn't take long. Probably our first course, what happened is we would have pediatric nurses in the audience, and they would come up to me and say, thank you for including peds. We can see where pediatrics is here, but pediatric nurses don't want to sit here and listen to all this discussion of adults. We need our own course. And so quickly we realized that while there certainly are common threads, there also is a need for curricula that speak to specific needs of populations. And so in our really early years, we developed the ELNEC core, which continues. as sort of the generic curriculum, but we also developed an ELNEC pediatric curriculum, so specific to pediatrics from neonates through all child ages. We developed a geriatric curriculum because we saw the real needs for elderly patients. And again, there's some overlap with oncology because we know so many oncology patients are actually older people who have many other comorbidities. We also created a critical care curriculum because we saw the unique needs of patients in ICU settings. Over the years, we then continued to listen to needs. And so, for example, we developed ELNEC for advanced practice nursing because our APRNs are such a huge, important part of the workforce to address palliative care needs. One of our most recent curriculum I'm particularly excited about is our oncology advanced practice nursing curriculum that is intended to be a generalist model. By that, I mean, it's wonderful that we now have palliative care teams. We have nurses certified in palliative care to be our specialists. But what we recognize is we also have this wonderful wealth of opportunity in oncology advanced practice nurses. So oncology nurses who are certified in oncology, they are practicing as advanced practitioners. So they're very, very good at being oncology specialists. And what they need is sort of an infusion of palliative care knowledge so that they can really incorporate palliative care within their oncology APRN role. So we have a grant from the National Cancer Institute called our Oncology APRN curriculum, where nurses who are oncology APRNs come through our training in order to really learn palliative care and then incorporate that into their everyday role as an oncology advanced practice nurse. So, for example, a nurse who's an NP in a breast cancer clinic may come and then hopefully learn some good pain and symptom management, psychosocial support, grief and bereavement strategies so that he or she goes back into their work setting. They continue in their role as a breast cancer NP, but they're now doing that, incorporating the best of palliative care. So that's one of our great examples because we know the oncology workforce is so vital to delivering palliative care for all oncology patients. And so these are examples of the kind of training program. The last area that we've invested a lot of energy the last 5 years is working with schools of nursing. Everything we've done over the last 20 years, in some ways, I think of it as kind of catch up. We're always out there trying to train nurses who are already in practice to give them the knowledge and skills that they never got in their formal education. And so 5 years ago, we said, we have to turn this around. It will be much better when nurses enter their practice already having a base of a foundation of palliative care knowledge. And so our partner in ELNEC is the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, and we've worked closely with the AACN to create ELNEC curricula specific for undergraduate and graduate education. And those curricula have been rolled out already in more than 500 schools of nursing. So we absolutely believe that we need the continuing education for nurses in practice, but we also really need to work closely with AACN and our colleagues in schools of nursing to see that palliative care is well integrated in every education program.
That is so important and really getting us back to our core of nursing, and so important that it be integrated into our basic training. You've perfected, I think, the whole strategy of train the trainer through the ELNEC and been able to reach so many more nurses as a result. Can you talk about that a little bit and the importance to the success of the program?
When we started, as I said, it took us about 5 years of begging, pleading, banging our heads against the wall to get support to start ELNEC. But I remember vividly the first day that we sat down, sort of at a table. There were 5 or 6 of us and blank paper in front of us. And we said, what are we going to do? And we realized that we had an enormous task because there are so many nurses to be trained. So immediately we thought the only way that we can begin to impact nursing practice and really impact patient care is through a train the trainer model, that we would never have the luxury of holding courses where individuals would come just to learn this knowledge for themselves. we had to always have this belief that everyone who comes to an ELNEC course will return to their own setting and train others. So we jokingly refer to this as the greatest pyramid scheme, because our sort of internal joke is like, this is a big pyramid scheme. Like every person we teach, we count on them to teach others. And so we actually have a lot of data, as you can imagine, over 20 years. And our data tells us that the average person who attends an ELNEC course teaches an additional 30 others within the first year of attending an ELNEC training. And those, I always think, are very conservative estimates, that those numbers are probably low. And the truth is, we have ELNEC trainers now that have been out training people for 20 years. And so the numbers really continue. But even in the most conservative, we always started with ELNEC by saying we would stand at the back of the room, in the early years when we were doing our first course, our second course, our third course. We would stand in the back of the room and we would say, you know what? If one of these nurses in this room goes home and provides better care to one patient, it's all been worth it. And then at the same time, we've said, and we hope every person in this room goes home and trains many, many more. And I'll share a really fun story with you. Several years into ELNEC, probably about our 8th, 9th year, I was standing in a conference room at one of our ELNEC courses with Pam Malloy. Pam was on my team for many years, just retired about a year ago. Pam is also a career-long oncology nurse. And Pam and I were standing at one of the coffee breaks at an ELNEC course, and this lovely young woman came up to us, and her name was Sayaka. She was from Japan. And Sayaka introduced herself to Pam and I, and she said, I am in Japan. I'm in a doctoral program, and my professors have given me permission that for my doctoral dissertation, if you will agree, that I would like to take the ELNEC curriculum and translate it to Japanese. And Pam and I both kind of looked at each other. At the time, our curriculum was mostly hard copy. We were functioning from, it was about 1,000 pages. And so I think both Pam and I kind of looked at each other like, good luck, honey. That's a big job. And I also have to say, I personally sort of had a moment, because several years before I had been in Japan and essentially been asked to leave the country because I tried to discuss why it was important for patients to be told their prognosis. And so it was one of those moments where I thought, wow, I had to leave the country for suggesting that nurses tell patients if they were dying. And this nurse is standing here to ask if she can translate ELNEC into Japanese. And so, of course, Pam and I looked at each other, and then we looked at this beautiful, brilliant, wonderful young nurse, and we said, go for it. Well, the fun part of this story, which I could obviously go on for a long time, is last year I was invited to come to Japan to participate in the 10th anniversary of ELNEC training. And I just looked at the numbers about 2 weeks ago, and I can tell you that ELNEC Japan, which is a strong organization, actually organized within the Japan Palliative Medicine Society, but ELNEC Japan has now trained 40,000 clinicians. 40,000. So it's one of those lessons of why you need to say yes, right? There's so much potential. We need to remember that there are nurses everywhere who want to do the right thing, who want to provide better care to their patients, who are eager. And so Rose Verani, who is really my partner in crime in ELNEC, from day one, we said we have got to make it easy for people to do the right thing. So we created the ELNEC Train the Trainer curriculum. We sent people home. Here's your objectives. Here's your outlines. Here's your PowerPoint slides. Here's your test questions. You're CE ready. Go for it. And so we've tried to do everything possible to support ELNEC trainers so that they, in fact, can go forward and train others. And it's worked. It's worked because of the passion, the commitment of nurses who want to improve patient care.
Such a great story about Japan. I loved it. And while we're celebrating 1 million, it sounds like it's at least 30 million, Betty.
Yeah. It's honestly, I think our numbers are really underrepresented. And the truth is things are sort of exploding everywhere. And now One of the great things is that it probably was our second, third year where we started hearing about ELNEC activities happening all over the country and all over the world that we knew nothing about. And I always consider that's the measure of success. Pam Malloy used to do something every December, which I loved, and that was Pam keeps a record of people who want to actually train the trainer courses. So there is an approval process if they want to host an ELNEC training course. And every December, Pam then would do a tally, and then she would inform the rest of the team of how many ELNEC courses had happened that year around the country, train the trainer courses. So the best way to think about this is these are courses that we had nothing to do with. Right? Somebody in Omaha, somebody in Miami, somebody in Albuquerque was holding an ELNEC train the trainer course, and it wasn't us. And so typically it's around 250 courses are held around the country that we did not do ourselves. That's fantastic. There's amazing work happening in ELNEC India. There's great grassroots efforts. There are Oncology Nursing Society chapters. There are just great people in every corner of the world who are doing things. And it's fun to count. I love the numbers. I'm a researcher. But what's more important is just to say nurses are leading this initiative. Nurses are making the difference in patient care.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people need the tools because you're right. I think it's so much about what nursing is all about. And certainly when people have the tools to do it, it just is part of who we are. So thank you for providing us with the tools. Is there something about palliative care that you wish people knew more about that isn't part of our regular conversation?
I do think the biggest issue remains that we just must have a new conceptualization of palliative care, that it is timely from the onset of a diagnosis. I've been involved since the beginnings of the National Guidelines for Palliative Care, and our 4th edition came out in 2018. And one of the important changes is that we changed the language to say palliative care is for people with serious illness, period. So instead of saying, early stage, late stage, stage 4, stage 3, how many months till the end of life, we just said serious illness, because even if you're the person diagnosed with a very treatable cancer, an early stage breast cancer, for example, an early stage colon cancer, the people we expect to survive and live a very long time, if you've heard the words, you have cancer, you have a serious illness. And the reality is that you need the support that palliative care can provide. And so I think our biggest challenge is really to continue that. I'll give you an oncology-specific example, and that is my colleagues and I just concluded a study in the last year funded by the National Cancer Institute on integrating palliative care for patients on phase 1 trials. Every oncology nurse knows if we really want to advance cancer care, if we truly want to cure cancer, there is one route to that, and that is research. We have to test new approaches. And so oncology nurses are committed to supporting patients on clinical trials so that we can find better answers. Look at the pediatric oncology world. That's why, the face of pediatric oncology today is a very different face than when I started in oncology. So clinical trials are important. And so we conducted a study in which we tested what if at the same day the patient was starting on a phase 1 clinical trial, we also integrated palliative care into the practice of the nurses caring for this patient. And so that's the mind shift of, instead of either we keep focusing on disease-focused therapies, or we think about palliative care. We have to eliminate that. We have to say and. Palliative care and the best of oncology care.
What's coming up? What's the next decade going to look like? What are your goals for ELNEC for the future?
One of the things we've certainly all learned a lot of lessons through COVID, and also I will say that during COVID, we've seen that if ever there was a time for palliative care, this has been it. Nurses around the world desperately needed resources for COVID. And so we actually launched an ELNEC COVID project where we developed and are now widely disseminating resources specific to symptom management, communication, bereavement support, all the aspects of COVID care. And so that's been great that we could use our ELNEC infrastructure. And again, we developed resources, launched them on our website, and then suddenly around the world, our colleagues in Japan, the Philippines, India, Eastern Europe were saying, great, we're already translating. So having a network of people out there who could, even in the times of COVID, take our COVID resources and run with them, that's been fantastic. One of the things we've learned from COVID is also we seriously underestimated the power of online learning. ELNEC has been doing online education for a good 10 years. Our 4 kind of cornerstone curriculum of core, peds, critical care, and geriatrics have been online for a decade. But once we, like everyone else, had to start canceling in-person courses and converting them to online, of course, old school people like me kind of sit and grumble and say, I don't know, I just don't think this is the same. We need that in-person energy. But we did what we needed to do, and we converted our courses to online. And guess what? It all worked out great. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there are people on our online courses that probably would never have the travel funds or the capacity to come to in-person training. So we're doing more and more online. We are just launching this month a new curriculum, which is on communication, and it's interprofessional. So that's exciting too. So it's nurses, chaplains, and social workers, also specific to oncology, an interprofessional cancer communication curriculum. And that is, we now are launching all new things with an online component. So for example, this interprofessional communication curriculum supported by NCI, provides for oncology nurses to come with a colleague from another discipline, social worker or chaplaincy, to come to an in-person train the trainer experience, but then go home with an online curriculum to help them teach their colleagues. So I think the future will include, much more use of online training, which is wonderful. And I still think there's a need for the combination to have in-person opportunities, because when we have our in-person courses, that's a time for networking, for nurses to really have that passionate energy, to see their colleagues, but it's also really facilitated by online resources.
Very exciting. So you've described a lot of resources already, but I just wondered if there's nurses out there listening to this that don't know about ELNEC or may have heard of it, but don't know how to access some of the resources you've described. How do they do that?
So our website is www.aacnnursing.org/ELNEC. If you go to our ELNEC website, you will see, you can click on About ELNEC. That provides a whole overview of all things ELNEC. You can also click on our COVID resources. Everything we have there is free. There are slide sets to train your staff. There's resources on bereavement support for your staff. There's beautiful symptom algorithms that were created by Judy Pace, a wonderful oncology nurse. There's communication vignettes to demonstrate how do you do a phone call and talk to families at home about a patient who's died. There's pediatric resources. So there's an abundance of resources there. But on the website, you will also see all of our training opportunities. So I particularly mention our interprofessional communication curriculum and our oncology APRN curriculum, both who are funded by NCI, so free course registration for those accepted, as well as travel stipend, and links to many, many resources. So everything is there on our ELNEC website, and certainly you can always reach out directly to me, B. Ferrell, Ferrell @coh.org. We're glad to help you. There's so many needs, and we know that our colleagues are barely hanging on out there in the clinical settings. People are so overwhelmed. We want to share as many resources as we can. So really, on behalf of the whole ELNEC team, I just want to give a big shout out to every oncology nurse in America, because, I work in a cancer center and I look at my own cancer center and I see these nurses who, in the midst of a pandemic, our nurses are showing up every day because cancer doesn't stop, right? And so that terrified patient newly diagnosed with cancer, that would be overwhelming enough at any time. But to face a new diagnosis of cancer in the midst of a pandemic, whoever, never in my 43 career in oncology nursing would I even think of such. And yet oncology nurses are doing this work every day. They are continuing to show up and provide the best cancer care to patients, to every patient that they can. And so all of us in ELNEC are really, really so humbled by just the ongoing work of oncology nurses because they continue to deliver the best of oncology care.
Thank you so much for this inspiring conversation and for your message about oncology nurses to our members. We really appreciate your time today and providing us with this overview of ELNEC that has been certainly in my career, which is similar in span as yours, and just the contributions that you have made. Your work in palliative care and the ELNEC program are legendary in oncology nursing, and many of us have benefited from your expertise in palliating symptoms and caring for patients at the end of life. And for those starting treatment who need the kind of symptom management that you described. It has really been a privilege for me to have this time to celebrate with you, and I really congratulate you and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Betty. So now let's hear from ONS members who have participated in ELNEC. These are oncology nurses, represent a small sample of the more than 1 million nurses and other healthcare providers educated through ELNEC.
My name is Jacqueline Boreland, and I'm a registered nurse working as an oncology nurse navigator in a hematology-oncology clinic at a veterans hospital. My journey to attending the ELNEC Oncology APRN training was a fortunate turn of events. I attended the ONS Congress in April of 2019 that was held in Anaheim, California. I stopped by the ELNEC booth to pick up some resource materials, and they had a raffle giveaway that I entered. To my surprise, that evening when I returned to my hotel, I received a message indicating that I won a prize. When I went to pick up my raffle prize, which was a new palliative nursing textbook that was published but not yet distributed, I learned about the upcoming ELNEC training and was encouraged to apply for the scholarship to attend. By the way, thank you, National Cancer Institute, for providing the grant to fund this course. The application was super easy, and I knew that I had leaders at my organization who would write the letters of recommendation needed for the application. I was so excited to receive notification that I was selected. I had received snippets of palliative care training when I attended pain management workshops at my previous employer. One of the presenters was an ELNEC-trained clinical nurse specialist and shared how important the ELNEC was for palliative care training. Back then, I never dreamed I would have the opportunity to attend an ELNEC training course. However, I'm so glad that I did. This consortium offers expertise to help oncology nurses make clinical decisions and provide exceptional care. The reason the ELNEC Oncology APRN course is so important is because every single attendee leaves the training with valuable information that they can put into practice immediately. I know that I did. Additionally, practitioners will be better equipped to work with clients at the end of life or those who require alternatives because their disease is unresponsive to conventional treatment. I really enjoyed the webinars and the additional resources on the ELNEC website. In fact, I posted a link to the free resource titled ELNEC Support for Nurses During COVID-19 on our ONS chapter page. The ELNEC Oncology APRN training was jam-packed with valuable information and resources that I will use for years to come. All I can say is thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hello, I'm Karin Elkins. I'm a nursing professional development specialist at Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina. I came to know ELNEC very early in my time here at MUSC in the specialty of professional development as I got to work with some of the palliative care practitioners who worked with our direct care staff and came to hear about a course being offered called ELNEC, which intrigued me. I was always in oncology in my entire career, and so it was something that I was passionate about. And our organization was seeking for more of our staff to become trainers for ELNEC. So I was honored to be selected to attend an ELNEC training course and become a trainer for their core curriculum, which is typically used with the acute care and medical surgical areas to help those nurses and other staff gain skill and learn more enriched content about taking care of patients receiving palliative care and who are near end of life. So after I took the course, I partnered with other staff in our institution who had also taken the course and were trainers to start thinking about offering ELNEC in our organization. And we ended up, since that time I became a trainer in 2014, we've offered 5 ELNEC courses. We've offered varying curriculums. So I've taken part in training the core content, but we've also offered the pediatric and critical care content as well through the other trainers in our organization. So this has offered us the opportunity to touch hundreds of our staff with this important content and these important skills that can really enrich their practice, especially for the oncology population. What I love about ELNEC, especially as an educator, which is my role now, is that ELNEC is a evidence-based, sound content that is updated frequently and offers not only background and foundational content, but also wonderful tools and activities and exercises that the participants do during the course to really get to practice the skills and apply the content so that when they go back to their own practice, they can really try what they've learned and make it their own. We have had strong participation from our oncology clinicians in our ELNEC courses every time we've offered it. And it's really enriched the care that they've given in the various oncology settings here, including a tie to legacy work and some of the alternative therapies that we've been trying to offer. I am passionate about getting direct care clinicians what they need to take the best care of these patients that they can. And I think ELNEC is a beautiful tool to support palliative care and end of life. It is multiple modules that cover everything from communication and cultural, spiritual aspects of care to the physical symptom management and what's it like in that last hour or two of life. So I think the breadth of the content, that it is evidence-based, updated regularly by such relevant leaders in the specialty that make it and keep it current and relevant. And then the flexibility of the content, being that it's in modules, you can offer single modules at a time or groupings of modules or all of it in a 1 or 2 day course. So there's different ways that you can package it. It has many, many resources regarding supplemental activities and exercises that you can use to customize it for your audience and for the learners to enrich that experience to make it most meaningful for taking back to their practice.
My name's Tracy Garrett-Reed. I am an advanced oncology certified nurse practitioner at East Jefferson General Hospital in Metairie, Louisiana. I attended ELNEC in Atlanta, Georgia in September of 2019. I chose to participate in ELNEC to obtain more knowledge about palliative care services and also how to become more comfortable initiating the end-of-life discussion with my patients. The training that I received gave me an insight of the patient's perspective on end of life, and initiating the conversation about palliative care was somewhat difficult for me prior to the course, but now I feel as though I am better at starting the conversation about end of life and helping patients prepare for their cancer care trajectory and also including their families in the plan of care. Now my patients are well informed about palliative care services and that it's symptom management and not, oh, you're dying today or you'll die next week, and it's not failure. It's definitely to support the patients and their family in such a difficult time. Our patients look to us for guidance, compassion, and empathy throughout their cancer care. And as an oncology healthcare professional, I feel it's my duty to provide them with optimal medical care as well as emotional support. I definitely recommend that all advanced oncology nurse practitioners go through this training just to get a better understanding of palliative care services and when it's needed. When I attended this course, the very last day, I cried. I was so emotional just thinking about all of my patients and how we sometimes take life for granted. I appreciate you all for letting me tell my story and my experience about ELNEC, and every oncology nurse practitioner should definitely attend this course.
Hi, my name is Tiffany McConathy. I'm a nurse practitioner and a certified oncology nurse practitioner at Genesis Cancer Center in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I went to the ELNEC training course in September of 2019 in Atlanta, Georgia. We spent 3 days together discussing palliative care. I live in a small rural community with minimal local resources for palliative care. We serve 6 even smaller communities around Arkansas. I actually signed up for this program when there was no palliative care organizations in our city or within 60 miles of our city. There's still not a fully functioning palliative care program in the area. I felt it was necessary to bring back knowledge to our community, to share with our patients and other providers in our city. In Arkansas, palliative care is widely misunderstood and taken to mean hospice. People assume palliative care and hospice terms are synonymous when they are not. I wanted to learn how to incorporate palliative care into my current practice without the stigma of hospice following me. This course has broadened my knowledge in palliative care and is a must-do for anyone working in oncology or any setting to better care for our populations with incurable diseases. Since taking this course, I've incorporated the palliative care model into practice with many of my cancer patients at diagnosis. One of the major assessments at the beginning of the diagnosis is evaluating the patient's goals of care and continuing this conversation throughout their journey. I feel goals of care discussions were not taking place throughout treatments, and many patients had symptoms that were not adequately addressed, or that the family would tell me or tell the patient how they felt we needed to proceed. I feel implementing the goals of care conversations as well as symptom management questions has greatly improved the quality of life for our patients. Further, it has facilitated an opening a line of communication between the provider and the patient. I feel they trust me more and can open up to tell me how they're really feeling. I've had several patients tell me they feel I am really trying to listen and address their problems and concerns. One specific example, I was caring for a patient with metastatic lung cancer who had been brought through 2 lines of therapy and attempted a third. Each treatment caused side effects, delays, and declines of quality of life. After we tried the subsequent line of treatment, he expressed his quality of life was waning. We had an extensive discussion about this, about continuing treatment versus maintaining quality. I feel I was able to give him a good treatment plan that catered towards maintaining his quality. He was extremely pleased with this, and I was only able to do this because I attended the ELNEC course. I had basics beforehand, but the in-depth knowledge I learned through the course was invaluable.
I'm Sara Tinsley from Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida. I've been a nurse practitioner for about 27 years and a nurse for about 30 years. I have worked in oncology the entire time. I've also moonlighted with our local hospice, and I was genuinely drawn to this ELNEC training, End-of-Life Nursing Education, based on my interaction with patients at Moffitt Cancer Center. I have seen some really wonderful deaths where people died peacefully, and I've seen some really horrifying deaths. My job as a nurse practitioner is to really make this transition into end-of-life care as seamless as possible, and that's why I was interested in being trained in end-of-life nursing education. This was a wonderful experience for me. The main skill that I think was really brought forth during this period was communication skills training. We also went over symptom training. I think I have pretty good skills as far as managing symptoms, although we can all improve. The communication piece was really what touched my heart because I feel awkward when talking with patients and their family members about dying. The patients look to us because they have a relationship with us. And that also came through in ELNEC, that the rapport that you develop with patients really is like the glue that holds everything together. And that enables you to communicate better with your patients and the family and really make a meaningful, lasting impact while they're in that end-of-life process and then afterwards. I want to be a researcher as well as a nurse practitioner, and I've been working on a K-23 and designing a patient decision-making model focused on quality of life in a high-risk population. High risk meaning patients 60 years of age and older who are diagnosed with acute myelogenous leukemia. The median age for diagnosis is 68 years of age, and overall survival in that group at 5 years is less than 10%. So I know that there was a lot of work needed to improve the outcomes. And so I submitted an NIH grant for a K-23, primarily because I don't really have enough time working as a nurse practitioner 40 hours a week to become a researcher. During this process with ELNEC, I did receive the award from the NIH, the National Institute of Nursing Research, for the development of a quality of life decision-making model for older patients diagnosed with AML. So this was really, it fit perfectly in my career development plan, even though I completed the training prior to the award. The skills that are outlined included communication skills training, and I hope to make a huge difference or even a small difference in several different patients' lives with making better decisions when they come up to treatment.
My name is Jennifer Tschanz. I'm an oncology nurse practitioner in the Hematology Oncology Clinic at the Naval Medical Readiness Training Center in San Diego. As a new graduate nurse, I felt my training was limited with regards to caring for patients with life-limiting illness and who were at the end of life. I remember as a new grad nurse walking into the room of an actively dying patient. The room was dim and filled with family members who had many questions and high emotions. I felt overwhelmed, underprepared, and helpless. As with many lessons in my nursing career, I learned on the job. Thankfully, there were experienced mentors who guided me too. Many of my early lessons were from observing bad news delivered poorly, and even floundering myself when I didn't know how to answer questions or if someone was crying in front of me. I witnessed suffering by both patients and family members as they tried to navigate increasing weakness, excruciating pain, mental anguish, and spiritual distress. I saw my colleagues cry after a shift working with families who had strange dynamics, or learning that a beloved patient had died. I also knew the joy of speaking with family after their loved one had died and having them tell me they found comfort knowing their loved one's needs and goals were met. The work could be challenging and emotionally heavy, and at the same time, very rewarding. Participating in my first ELNEC training, I was able to fill in the gaps from when I felt underprepared in my earlier days of patient care. Through ELNEC, I learned that we as healthcare professionals could still offer hope, even when cure or eradication of the disease or illness was not an option. I gained knowledge and skills in pain and symptom management that could ease patients' suffering and add quality to their days. I found the module on communication the most helpful. The tips on how to discuss goals of care, elicit what is important, talk about changes in condition, discuss available options to meet goals, the sometimes challenging, time-sucking, and highly emotional conversations. I found the communication tools help me navigate these types of discussions more confidently. I find the same skills helpful when talking with newly diagnosed cancer patients with curative goals and cancer patients navigating survivorship issues. The same communication skills have also enhanced the working dynamics of our care team. Personally, the same set of tools has been invaluable in having conversation with my own family members and friends caring for loved ones. When we can determine what is important to the patient, we can set the priorities for care and develop a plan to get there as best we can. As an ELNEC trainer, I've had the opportunity to share ELNEC with other nurses and healthcare professionals and enhance their ability to provide excellent care. At our institution, we have provided ELNEC trainings. We have also provided opportunities for staff to practice discussing goals of care and practice preparing families for the final hours of life based on ELNEC. It is rewarding to hear our students report feeling more comfortable discussing these hard topics after attending our trainings. From the lessons I have gained from ELNEC and the mentorship of the ELNEC team, I've developed courage and compassion to identify and focus on what matters. With this courage, I've had the opportunity to develop connections with patients, families, and colleagues that make this challenging and sacred work rewarding. For that courage and those connections, I'm very grateful to the ELNEC team. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. Tell us about your favorite part of this episode by leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts. For more resources and information about oncology nursing, visit us at ons.org or voice.ons.org.